The wedge theory is like, for those of us that are not black or indigenous on one end, like, consider it a spectrum. White on one side, black indigenous on the other. But where do Latinos and Asians fall, right? And the Latinos and Asians, it's two different things. Like Latinos, there's a proximity to blackness because of having like the same socioeconomic background in the U.S., right? Because they are a lot of Latinos in this country are migrants or, originally. And so the idea is because of their proximity to blackness, they're like white folks see their proximity to blackness, and so they're treated the same or similarly to those who are black. Whereas Asian folks were brought in very differently to this country. And because we came in, minus those that came very early on, we came into this country later, post 1965. And so because we came in post 1965, only the professionals came. And so we already had heard about America. I say we as an Asian, like we heard about America, and we learned that to survive in this country, we needed to align ourselves with whiteness and not blackness because we didn't want to catch that smoke, essentially. So we aligned ourselves with whiteness. And so proximity to whiteness keeps us, quote unquote, safer. But in doing that, they can be like, model minority. If the Asians can do it, why can't you do it? And so we created a wedge as people of color against other people of color.
Yeah.
It's a whole thing. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a whole thing. And then like the riots in LA, the wedge theory came in crazy because professionals from Asia came, but they're not allowed to be doctors here. But they can get a loan because they're proximity to whiteness. But they can only get a loan in black neighborhoods.
Right.
Where black people couldn't get loans.
Right.
And so there's that automatic tension. Like, and that's why when everything blew up in LA, that tension was going because you created this sort of wedge between people of color when it's based on proximity to whiteness versus blackness, and that proximity to blackness being unsafe because the ruling sort of idea here is white supremacy.
Right.
So it's this whole thing, and yeah,
it's the classic divide and conquer.
Yeah.
That's been used.
It's divide and conquer. And the problem is, even people who are a part of that, Asian folks will be like, well, we did it. Like, it becomes we are the model minority. And then you have to be like, we're not the model minority. We are just you're doing what you need to survive, and it's working, but to the detriment of other people.
Right.
And then that's the problem. No one wants to see that. So, yeah.
Florida or something, the way they wanted to acknowledge Asian history, but while removing black history.
Yeah.
And you see that here with the federal level with the anti-Semitism they're fighting, because Jewish folks are sometimes considered minorities or oppressed folks too. So the federal government is doing fighting a lot of anti-Semitism in their mind, targeting universities that have protests. And they're saying that's how they're combating discrimination.
Right.
You know?
And somehow they blame all of this on critical race theory, which is just saying, we don't like our history, let's do better.
It's just looking at it in a truthful way.
Yeah. When we talk about critical race theory and the war on information, that while it is scary and while it is sort of a shock that that in the year 2025, we're having this discussion again, or we continue to have this discussion, it's good to know that there are people who are fighting it, and that there are people whose memories are what is going to keep this fight going.
Exactly.
And I think that is actually something that, people can join in on. Let's learn our history, and let's at least keep it in our memory so that it could be, if we can't be taught formally in schools for now, let's at least have those conversations amongst ourselves.
Exactly. And this isn't new, and it reminds me of some James Baldwin quotes, which actually I need to find them on my phone really quick. But I want to pull up these James Baldwin quotes, because he would often talk about this as actually being one of the big issues with America, is like white people's inability to confront the truth. Oh yeah, okay.
Ooh, okay, I like that.
Baldwin.
I like that. Oh yeah.
Fire, man.
Yeah.
So I want to wrap up with some quotes from James Baldwin, who talked about this 70 years ago and talked about the inability of America to face its history as being one of the central conflicts in this country. So in one of his books called No Name in the Street, he says, quote, "People who imagine that history flatters them as it does since they wrote it are impaled on their history like a butterfly on a pin and become incapable of seeing and changing themselves or the world. And another quote from The Fire Next Time, where he says, quote, white people are still trapped in a history which they do not understand, and until they understand it, they cannot be released from it. And one more from our great James Baldwin, where he says, to accept one's past, one's history, is not the same as drowning in it. It is learning from it and how to use it. So it's difficult to address history, to face the facts sometimes, but if you don't do it, it's like you're trapped in a reality of this greatness, that this myth of this country that you see many people are trapped in today.
Right. And, you know, the quote said it, you're not going to be able to change the world if you can't even change yourself.
Right.
So that are definitely some words to live by.
Welcome back to Breakdown Friday. Joseph Ward, Patrick Irvin, Professor Carl Tone Jones. We are here to go in on this wedge theory. Two parts, though. Two parts to this conversation we're having today. First, we're going to really get into this wedge theory, wrap our minds around this wedge theory and what it is and how it has been used. But also, not just how it's been used, but how people were willing to be used. Other groups, other non-white groups were willing to be used and willing to benefit themselves at the cost of others to come back and then say, hey, well, we should all get along, but you took the handouts at the detriment of others for your own group survival. So we are going to be talking about group survival and the choices that a lot of these other non-black groups who are also non-white made, these other groups of color. But also, second half, moving into what they were talking about, critical race theory also being used as a wedge between the races. But the idea of white people not being able to confront their truth, and white people don't understand their history, and white people don't realize the change that they need to make, because I kind of disagree with James Baldwin on that, and we're gonna expand on that. So PC, man, let's start with you, my brother. And I want to start with you because of the environment that you grew up in versus the environment that I grew up in. Philly is a bit more racially diverse. Well, how racially diverse is Philly? Because Tallahassee is pretty much a black and white city.
Oh, well, racially is black and white.
Okay.
Now, ethnic, if you're talking about the ethnic components, then you can throw in Latinos, you can throw in the Jews, you can throw in the Italians, the Irish, the Russians.
Okay.
So and then you can throw in the non-American blacks, you can throw in the Jamaicans.
Okay.
Really don't have a big Haitian population here.
So more ethnically diverse.
Right, but it's growing. And then the African countries that
Got it.
So,
okay.
Yeah. So it's not in terms of if you want to use the term foundational American black, it's not that as much. We have a lot of that, but there's also diversity within the black community of Philadelphia.
Okay.
So and trust me, all those things are played against each other. You have the the gang wars that took place between the young brothers, the Liberian community in West Philly versus those who would now probably identify as ADOS or FBA, black folk down there in West Philly. You had that going on for a while. We've had the issues with and I'm talking about just within the community.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when you talk about others, there are like the Asian community. There's a nice, decent sized Asian community here. We have Chinatown, we have Koreatown, we have so, and then there's pockets of the city that are Cambodian. So Cambodian, Filipino there's different pockets of the city that operate like that. Not really big Japanese sort of thing, but
right.
So we do have all those, those different pockets in terms of the different groups, race wise and ethnicity wise. We do have those.
Gotcha. Because I believe the last time I looked, Tallahassee was like 50-something% white, 30% something black, a growing Hispanic population, and the rest is everybody else. But Tallahassee has always been predominantly black and white. And so it hasn't been enough of the other groups for this particular wedge theory in this city to really take hold. But starting with you, because growing up in more of an ethnic diverse place, how did you, well, first of all, what do you think about this wedge theory, and how did you notice, or did you notice this wedge theory, or even now, how do you see the wedge theory playing out as far as the divide and conquer aspect of it?
I think any group that comes to America makes a partnership, or they agree to a partnership to team up with the dominant class here. And in doing so is always, at a cost to us. And, in terms of people who identify as being, natively from this country. So you about to roll with another question.
No. What? Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Because it just because I'm glad you said it like that, because it's saying the Asian girl. I'm hearing what she's saying, but it's kind of, in my opinion, kind of disingenuous, because you're not acknowledging the groups thinking about themselves and being willing to step on us. Like, you're not including that. Like, you skim over it, but you're not really hammering that home. Like, they were willing to step on us to enrich themselves.
Okay, so let me say it like this. In the Black community, we currently have a very divided community between the men and the women, right? Mm-hmm. And a lot of the division comes from the concepts of the women being given government aid and assistance, corporate aid and assistance at the behest of the men, right? Mm-hmm. And so the same way we have to call that out and deal with the accountability for that division, then you pretty much have to also call other nations out for their culpability, their acceptance of these things, because everybody understands when they're operating in good faith. And then you also understand when you're given privilege over somebody else or another group, and that group is going to be minimalized, or that group is going to be harmed based on the actions that you take. And if you continue to agree to deal with it, typically most people tend to keep moving forward in that particular dynamic when they don't think there's ever going to be pushback, or there's ever going to be a recourse for their actions. It's only after they've been burned by that other class, that dominant class themselves, and they start falling back on, well, we should have done this, and we were tricked, and we were bamboozled. No. You went along with the program, but you didn't realize, you didn't have enough foresight to understand that eventually you yourself would fall in that pecking order of the program. So I think everybody teams up with Team White Supremacy when it comes to I mean, like she said, you're getting business loans in Black communities. Well, morally speaking, what you're doing. And I talked about it before, the last episode, the tax treaty laws, where it allows for, because of acts like the Homestead Act and things of that nature, it allows for other groups to come to this country and come not only with a clean slate, but also be given financial incentives, land grant incentives to come here. And so places that have liens, those tax liens are abated. And then the people that are coming and putting those businesses in there, they're getting startup money, and they get startup loans, and they get abatements themselves for at least a decade in many cases, for which they themselves don't have to pay any taxes on any profits that they make in those particular programs. So, it's really, like you said, it's disingenuous at best, because now it's like everybody realizes the one thing that the Latin community just realized. You really need Black people to stand tall with you, because Black people are the only people in this country that can't be evicted. We're the only people in this country that they can't say, hey, we're going to send you home somewhere and we're going to have ICE line you up or round you up. So now all these other groups are saying, hey, black people, stick your neck out on the line for us because you're the only ones that really can, be that. And we've seen how effective that your small population has had on changing the culture and through civil rights, through the Black Power movement, and through all the other suffrage movements that black people have engaged in. And we did that not just for here, but it spread as an example across the world. So when people see the strength, the intestinal strength, they see more strength in us than we do, by the way.
Yeah.
But when people see our intestinal strength, they want a piece of that and they want to partner back up to us. So this is what, my man AC, accountability commentary always calls the reach back. But this does nothing to do with the females reaching back to the men after discarding them for years. This is more so the other groups, whether it's an ethnic group or racial group, trying to reach back to black support after all these years, and then not fully being accountable for their part in the dirty deeds that were created against black people that they full-fledged partners in. Chinese and Asian folk, Chinese in particular, were very proud to announce that they were the model citizens, the model minorities here. They were very proud to talk about how they traded in their traditional clothing for, three-piece suits and shirts with a tie and moving and marching in the corporate world. They were very proud of that and being an example of that. And they were very proud as they were being paraded to the front. So now all of a sudden that the tide is starting to turn and you're starting to see the partnerships unravel. Now all of a sudden it's, more so along the lines of, well, hey, black folk, remember us? Yeah, hey, they bamboozled us. We were hoodwinked. Yeah. We were bamboozled. San Francisco rock fell on us.
Right.
So you have that, and then for her to even saying that the majority of the Chinese came here, the Asians came after 1965 is bullshit. Because then you go back into the history about the West Coast and Western expansion and all the things that, Chinese talk about in terms of the expansion of the railroad and how they were then mistreated, how they worked alongside blacks, and how they themselves were then treated as second and third class citizens throughout that time. And they speak to the persecution they felt in terms of establishing communities here. You don't get to establish a Chinatown in every major city if you just got here in 1965.
Yeah. Well, to be fair to her, she because it's the way she said it, right? Because she glossed over the first wave of Chinese that came in like the mid 1800s.
Well, what she said was very few, and that's just not true. They came by the boatload.
I know, because and I know this because I visited the Oakland Museum, and there was a great migration of Asians, particularly Chinese, that came into California, particularly that Oakland and San Francisco area in like the mid 1800s.
But let's talk about that for a second, because one of the biggest reasons for that is because they wanted to establish all white colonies over there. So California, Oregon, Utah, and all those in Washington State, they wanted to establish those as all white colonies. So they did not want to import any, especially toward the end of slavery, when slavery, the Civil War was over, they didn't want to import any black folk into those towns. So that's because at that particular time, there was also colonization taking place in Asian countries, in Japan and Korea and China. There was also colonization efforts going on there. So a lot of those people were fleeing persecution from there coming to America as well during that time.
Right.
And then we got to consider the what was it? The Chinese Exclusion Act of, I think it was 1882, which, there was a whole act about keeping the yellow peril and the opium crisis and all of that other stuff that was happening in the late 1800s. I'm not the greatest at math, but I'm pretty sure the 1800s came before the 1900s.
They did.
So
I turned 18 before 19. So
I'm just saying, like, I understood what she was trying to say, but when she said that, I got lost for a minute.
But also, it's very disingenuous for the second half of it to use the James Baldwin's quotes to make a moral plea about to make a moral plea to talk about white supremacy, really realizing the bad things that they're doing on a moral level. What are you guys going to do the same thing?
Well, let's look at how Asians treat black people when they come. Well, let's look at we can go back to the pandemic when they were falsely accusing Africans of spreading the pandemic in Asia and China.
Asian hate crime bill.
They were stripping them of their passports. They were locking them out, not allowing them to go into restaurants, not allowing them to go into hotels. They were kicking them out. They were beating them up in the streets and things of that nature. And so, I mean, the whole concept around the Asian hate crime bill was based on the supposed relationship between blacks and Asians in this country, which was false because right before that you had massacres of Asians being unalived by white assailants, but no, they wouldn't want to focus on that. You had time after time, hundreds of videos of black women being assaulted in either nail salons, beauty salons, with acetone being thrown in their faces, beaten with brooms and mops in these stores over that particular time. So, even those things were drummed up in terms of the whole notion of the good nature or the goodwill faith or the good faith practices that Asians had towards blacks. So, I mean, this is what spits in the face of all of those. Well, we're going to blame it all on white folk. What can we blame on white folk right now that happens between Asians and blacks? When I've personally seen the treatment in these stores, and I've personally seen it, and I'm not saying all, of course not all, but I'm saying I've seen it enough across the board where there's some issues there that speaks to years of disdain and malcontent when it comes to that relationship, and the majority of it typically doesn't come from black people because black people welcome every damn body into the hood.
That's what I'm saying, but it's like you can try to blame white people solely for this, but you still took the handouts, you still took the hands up, you still took the help at the detriment of another community. Even when you knew you would, even if you didn't know you were doing it in the beginning, you continued to do it, and they still continue to do it today.
Well, I'm gonna let Pat talk. I've been talking this whole time.
Yeah, but so to that, Pat, give us your thoughts on this wedge theory, but also how this Asian model minority was created at the expense of especially our community.
So now looking into it and thinking about it and hearing what she had to say, they've created a social theory of group interactions based on political terminology. Because if you had just said it's a wedge issue, all right, I know what a wedge issue is. That's politics 101. Well, 102. But that's political speak.
Right.
But when you say like social wedge theory or wedge theory of race, I'm thinking something different. And then she starts talking, and I hear basically political wedge issue.
All right.
So there's that. The thing I thought, the more she talked, the more I was like, this sounds like the typical young generation rebelling against their elders. This sounds like a young Asian lady trying to restructure things so that she can feel cool, accepted, and included. And she's going against the wisdom and the rules put in place by her elders, who put those things in place for the betterment of their community at the expense of everybody else. That's what I heard. And it looks familiar to me because I have read extensively about, and I'm not a part of the Asian community, but I have read pretty extensively about the Asian community and the creation of the model minority from the interior. And a lot of the things she's saying are things that the youth were saying back then. They just didn't have the power because of their culture to override the authority of the elders. And they're a collectivist culture. So the youth in every culture are always highly individualistic. Young people want to be recognized as individuals because they crave the acceptance that comes with that. It's a part of finding your identity as a young person. But you don't, a lot of the other cultures in the world that I've read about anyways, they don't base their entire culture off of the feelings of young people. And that's for good reason. And so that's what I saw here when she was talking, was just, all right, here is a young person that disagrees and feels like she is a part of harm being done because of the culture she grew up in. And she is trying to alleviate the harm she feels and the guilt
Asian
and the pain
guilt
she feels inside. And she's willing to sacrifice her culture to join a larger narrative that makes her feel better, which is in and of itself both young in thought and collectivist in nature. And she's a young person from a collectivist type culture. All right, that fits. I'm gonna just say it. Everybody can hate me if they want. I'm not a huge James Baldwin fan.
Yeah.
I can respect his level of thought and intellectualism, especially for the time period, because I do respect people knew what they knew and they know what they know. And the time you're in impacts the availability of information. So I respect James Baldwin as an intellectual and as a creative. But I really do wish we would stop acting like we have not progressed intellectually since the 60s. It is not enough to sit here and say, what was the quote? You look at that police officer and you say that I could be you, but I choose not to be. That is, I'm trying to find a nice way to say it. That is just not an acceptable analysis of the way that individuals present in groups.
Right.
Because it ignores the fact that that officer is that officer because of everything that that officer has experienced culturally, individualistically, as a part of the society. A white person, a black person cannot look at a white person and say, I'm not like them because I choose not to be. No, you're not like them because you're not them. You haven't gone through what they've gone through. You haven't been inculcated with the same cultural messages. You haven't been taught the same things. You don't have the same experiences. I can't look at a racist cop and say, well, the reason I'm not a racist cop is because I choose not to be. No, one, I'm not a cop. Two, I'm not white. Three, I didn't grow up white. I don't have those experiences. Four, I don't view black people from the same lens. It's not acceptable. Like telling people that is the same as telling to a black person and a white person, don't we both bleed the same? Like, is that the level of shallow analysis that we're bringing into these supposedly critical and in-depth conversations where we're just going to, that level of analysis is the same level of analysis I hear when I hear white people say, I don't see color. Well, but I'm black though. Like, I mean, even blind people see color. They might only see one or two, but they like, if you see black, you see something, that's a color. How do you not see nothing? So that's what I hear. And these shallow ass motherfuckers love trotting out James Baldwin to support their shallow ass analysis. And it's like, all right, cool. That worked for James Baldwin 70 years ago. You can't go no deeper than that. Like, you're like, all right, if James Baldwin can arise from the dead right now with the same level of knowledge he had in the 60s and have a conversation with you and teach you something about the world that's going on today that you didn't already realize, in my opinion, you are not equipped to handle this conversation.
Because it hasn't advanced. Your thought process hasn't advanced past the 60s. Past moral.
For them if you're, for all of these young people and old people, if you're still looking at James Baldwin as an intellectual giant who could arise from the grave nowadays with no additional insight or information and teach the world something about the way the world operates, and you would be one of the people that he's teaching, you need to not participate in these conversations. That's what you need to do. I'm sorry, I went off on a tangent.
Nah, I kind of figured you would. So
no, but just that's right and exact though, because first of all, and I'm not the biggest James Baldwin fan either. And I think, it's very interesting because James Baldwin, we would consider him these days, as a swirler, and these days and times, all of his, boyfriends were white men, if I understand it correctly. So he was always looking to bridge that gap and appeal to the sympathies of white folks. So he would always give them the benefit of the doubt when it came to, maybe some harsh critiques perhaps, but it was always with the extension of whether they don't know how they're doing this or they don't know who they are. Well, I believe they know solidly who they are. And it's been proven time and time again. You want to show that, then, you take the most ignorant, the most uneducated white person and you give them something that, if that thing to the black person or somebody that's not white, you will find out how much they know about themselves and their, entitlement when it comes to race. So, you know what I'm saying? You'll find that out quickly.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. No, well, I'm
gonna jump in there, just both of y'all, because I want to say this, and then I'm gonna let PC go back because he's cooking up. And I want to say it before I forget it. To her point about we're not a model minority. Listen, lady. Wow. If I get that you're doing what you feel like you need to do to survive and you're getting favorable treatment, but you are a minority group being used as the model of what an acceptable minority is. That by definition makes you the model minority. Stop, like y'all said earlier, stop running from your history, the same thing you accusing white people of doing.
Yes.
Stop running from it,
right,
and accept it.
Don't be a hypocrite.
Exactly. So, and to go back to the shallow, because I do agree. I think anybody at this particular day and age that consistently has to go back in history searching for quotes. When we live in a time where the time is evolving, this is not even the same world as 70 years ago. The dynamics have changed. I think that in itself speaks a lot to the lack of engagement in real, in terms of being change agents, in terms of being people who clamor to get the clout and being in this space, but really aren't prepared for the endeavors that come with it. So these people have never experienced the type of racism that, and I'm just talking in general, the type of things that they believe would move the needle on racism. They've never practically applied any of these philosophies, any of these quotes. They've never utilized them to see the practicality of any of the things that they've read in these books.
Right.
They've heard through a speech on YouTube or whatever. They've never done those things. So I think it's inherently dangerous because as influential as these influencers are, a lot of people who are intellectually lazy and choose not to do any real research of their own will just take their word and run with this. And so you'll have people making a whole argument with you concerning what this young lady and this young man just talked about, as if these are experts on a particular topic. And it sounds like neither one of them really have much of a clue in regards to that.
Well, James Baldwin said something, and I'm going to use it to make my whole point, going back from the model minority on up to the CRT and the moral and the morality thing, right? Because he said two things, really. White people can't confront the truth of the history of America, and white people don't understand their history. I disagree. Vehemently, I disagree. we don't understand history, period, as Black people in America. Because if Black people understood history as a whole, and if Black people understood the history of our interactions with other groups en masse overall, we wouldn't be sitting here having these conversations, these disingenuous conversations with people from other groups, from other races, other cultures like this, and then trying to bond over morality clause because everybody's trying to make sure that they're on the right side of history, and people are afraid to really say the real thing. Hey, and in order for this BIPOC thing or this Black and brown coalition stuff, in order for this to work, right, y'all got to be genuine people and genuine allies, and you have to really, you can't keep glossing over the why there's tension between the groups. Yeah, you say white people are the reason that the wedge is there. No, white people are part of the reason the wedge is there. The other part of the reason is you accepted the deal.
Well, I think Black people do understand. I think everybody understands to a degree the history and the dynamics between the races. I just think that you know, you always bump into somebody that think they're smarter than the next person. And I think too many people is too smart for their own goods. And I also think that it goes back to the miseducation Negro that Dr. Carter G. Woods to speak to. I think Black people, when it comes to relations to these groups of people, Black people are always looking for a backdoor in to, you know, to building alliances and coalitions. We're not standing out front, and we're not standing on being Black and creating Black nationalism. So our nation, you know, we have to negotiate now the benefits for our nation versus what benefits your nation will get. Because Black people always say, we helped you, and then when it came for you to help us, you didn't. Well, you didn't give them many terms in terms of what they needed to do to help you. In fact, you didn't even look at Black people and Democrats. Democrats don't have to promise Black people shit.
Right.
And Black people are always talking about the Democrats didn't give us anything. You don't ask them for anything. You're just happy because they scare you into saying, well, at least we're not Republicans. And then now you all co-align, like, and I'm saying you all because I don't co-align, you know, align with the, you know, Democratic y'all don't even know what the hell you're voting for half the time.
What?
And so I don't it's I think more people are more familiar with what's going on. Also think most people don't want to put in what they would have to put in and make a sacrifice that they would have to make in order to get what they need out of it.
I say people are familiar with the narratives, but I don't know if they, in my opinion, I don't know if they're really familiar with like the real details, but they are familiar with narratives that have details in them.
That could be it. I think a lot of them want to circumvent the process and just get to the end.
Well, because if you keep trying to appeal to people's morals, how much history has passed to show us that morals don't matter? They don't have the same morals. They don't give a damn like that. Who are we appealing to on the moral angle? And if you're still trying to do that till this day, you don't get it.
Okay, so that I get. What you just said, I get, because that speaks more into what Elder Neely Fuller says, which is, well, you know, and our ancestor Neely Fuller says, in which if you don't understand what racism, white supremacy is, what it does, now it operates, everything will serve to confuse you. Most Black people still don't understand that.
Yes.
Because they still believe race is about feelings. They still believe race is about getting along. They don't talk about this notion and concept. Other races understand, other ethnic groups understand that is about, you know, proximity, it's about power, it's about being able to take care of your own group and community. That means you actually have access to resources if you're not producing the resources yourself. And so that means you have to operate from a place of diplomacy with other groups, that you not they're trying to kiss their ass and playing let's get along to go along to get along. In that part, yeah, Black people still don't understand that part, because you can have this conversation with a litany of Black folk and they will not be able to understand what we're talking about, because their whole thing is about being hurt, you know, feelings being hurt. I just watched a documentary the other day that said something about look away, when it was talking about the Confederate flag in Mississippi and South Carolina, and how the state was, it really boiled down to Mississippi fighting to maintain the Confederate emblem on their flag and so forth. And when you heard the complaints from the black folk, whether it was a pastor, whether it was business people, whether it was president and in office and government and so forth, their whole thing was about how the flag made them feel and how it's a symbol of hatred. While the other folks said, no, this flag stands for this and it stands for that. It was more symbology attached to it than about the hurt feelings and things of that nature. It was more about the institutions that came from it than anything else. And it was about remembering the roots of those institutions and things of that nature. And as black folk, we still don't get that part.
That's why they would have the pushback against the Black history and the CRT and all those things there. If we're the dominant group, isn't it our job to remain dominant?
Yeah.
Why would I help you give yourself a leg up?
Yeah. If you see it as a war. See, we don't see it as a war. We see it as, social injustice.
We're playing patty cake.
Well, we're just playing. That's the thing. See, and it's funny. I just read I ain't gonna read it, but it's funny because we're too. Yeah, it was something that I don't want to offend nobody. We offend everybody, but that would probably be just draw some lines here that don't need to be drawn today. There is a finite understanding of when you're too comfortable that you really don't want to push for any change. Like what you see with the whole situation with the ICE roundups and things of that nature in the Latin community, they can't be comfortable. They got to have like underground tunnels and backyards and gates and basements that connect to one another to hide and move around. They can't be comfortable right now. So now they out in the streets. They ready to fight for that. Black folk are comfortable with how we get treated here. And so any community can do what they want to us. Look, you had, like I said, there was a situation where an Asian beauty shop owner beat the hell out of a black woman with a broom. This was a man, beat her with a broomstick, beat her out the door. The next day, he put a sign up, said hair weave and extensions, 50% off.
Yeah.
And they were beating up. Like I knew the sisters that was out there in New York. I knew them personally.
The Hebrew Israelites were trying to protect them and stop them from going in the store, and they were willing to fight the Hebrew Israelites.
They was willing to fight anybody to get to that damn weave. Mm-hmm. That's when you talk about what we're willing to give up, not even willing to give up things that are not personally like attached to us. You understand? So Pat talked about the question before, asking black people, what would you give up to help? One thing you would give up to help liberate black people. And the common response is, why do we have to give up anything? Asians, they gave up their culture to move forward. Now you look at China. China is a world power now.
And black people don't understand that if white supremacy falls, Asian supremacy will be right up next.
Well, right. Well, Asian supremacy, communism supremacy, because they're teaming up with Russia. But the bottom line is they did those things strategically because they saw back then what today would look like. They gave up something then. But even then, when they were talking that model minority shit, they were still telling their children, once you go to college, you have to go back to China for a year to remember the old ways.
Stay with your group. Move closer to white folk. Leave them Negroes alone.
Oh, definitely. No. Keep, that was practiced across the board. Any country and all countries that are not centralized in Africa, that was practiced across. But even in Africa, where people are skin bleaching, So, but I just wanted to drive that point home that the Chinese here in America would send their children back home to rediscover or to reconnect with their culture. The Japanese, they maintained their samurai culture, even though they donned the suits. That's why they still operated in the garb, and they still operate, and you still talk about the swords. You know what I'm saying? That they're so accustomed with the samurai, they still maintained the customs, even if they modeled something else. And so because when a group models something, it doesn't necessarily mean that they indoctrinated, but it just means they know how to act right around this particular time. And so those groups did those things to empower their home nations. And now what you have is, the inflation, stagflation going on here, primarily due because Japan and China are dumping American bonds, is the American cash anywhere they can right now in the world. They're getting rid of them. But there's also the supplant to rise up in the global scheme in terms of power versus this enemy that they were able to play chess with.
Go ahead, Pat. You were trying to jump in.
No, I wasn't. I was listening. I wasn't trying to jump in at all. I was listening. Like I was an audience member.
Yeah, he was over there serving up stew.
I know I took classes in this to get my master's degree. So I took classes in Asian culture because you have to take classes in minority, not minority, but diverse cultures and things of that nature if you're going to get an education degree. And I went to the college I went to get the degree. Right. So I knew a little bit, probably a little more in depth in terms of, how they focus in terms of their interactions and engagement with us over here.
At the end of the day, it's all about group survival, though. The majority of the group of people are going to choose themselves. They're going to have outliers, but the outliers don't represent enough of the population to have the whole group think changed. Group survival comes first. There's only one group of people in America where group survival isn't first. And yeah, that's the us's and the we's.
Well, I think the challenge that we face is that we've letting young people take so much control and have so large platforms without understanding that we should respect the energy of youth and we should respect the potential of youth. Mm-hmm. But a lot of that potential is unrealized.
You got to
shape it. It needs to be guided. It needs to be shaped. It needs to be molded. And so now the elders have, in their efforts to try to be cool with the youth, because there's more of that validation coming from there, they've stopped performing their role. And I think that is something that is now becoming a part of American culture, where the elders in general, the wisdom that used to be respected, that came from living for decades upon decades, where even if a young person is more studied, more educated, even if they are smarter, higher cognitive abilities, there's still things about life that they don't know that elderly person does because they've been here. And I think that component is also missing. And so in the Black community, that missing component becomes especially damaging because the elders are supposed to be the mediums between the elders of their day and the youth of today. In the same way that me being a middle-aged man, I'm supposed to be the medium between the elders and the young people.
Right.
Nobody wants to be the medium. Like the young people now think that they can go straight, and this is my beef with them. They think they can go straight to James Baldwin and read the words and get the. No, you don't understand the context. That's why you need the elder to transmit it to you.
Right.
Like, yeah, you can read the words, but there were so many things unsaid in the words that you don't understand.
Right.
So there are certain things, like there are certain times, certain things, a lot of things. When PC started cooking, I shut up. Because I know that there's a perspective he has that I don't have and that I'm not going to have. And it's the same with you, Joe. It's not even, it don't have to be an elder to elder thing. It could even be a peer-to-peer thing. Joe, you and I are similar age. When you start talking that shit about the shit you know about, I shut up and listen.
Right. You got to do that. You got to know how to do that.
But I think the problem nowadays is we got people like on this conversation with these young people, right? They just talking, right? and to them they deep, just like in a room full of weed heads.
You know what it reminds me of? Remember, we were looking at old footage of like the Black Power movement, Black Panthers in the 70s, and those people who were in the early 20s then and are immortalized today, and we're listening to what they're saying, but we're not listening to what they're saying as teenagers or people in our early 20s. We're listening to what they're saying as grown men, and we're like, oh, we didn't. It's a lot we missed because we didn't get, because they didn't get it because they were young.
Right. And we see that. And then on the other tip of it is like, if you're gonna, because I'm not saying young people do need to have these conversations. Iron sharpens iron, right? But we need to make sure that the iron is being used against iron. Like we gotta make sure that what we're sharpening is actually capable of being sharpened, is actually worth being sharpened, and it actually there's some purpose to sharpening it. And those are the things that come with context, come with wisdom, come with experience. This whole philosophy of love that every young generation throughout history that I've researched wants to push the world towards, this concept of love and uniformity. And it's a reason why old people know better. There's a reason why.
If this idea, this concept of love as people speak of it, was such a norm, such a thing that has been adopted over time. If it was that, we wouldn't be where we are. Like, people don't operate like that, you know, like especially the people in the positions of power don't operate like that. I don't think the average human being is inherently a bad person. Like the average human being, I don't think that, but we got enough people in positions of power with the right resources and the right or the wrong mind frames to make sure that this whole concept of love and unity and stuff ain't real.
Well, I won't say that the average person is a bad or a good person. I will say the average person will do whatever they need to do to survive. And if that means screwing you over, they will screw you over. And that's
what we miss. That's the point we continue to miss, though. Group survival and individual survival and survival within that group comes before anything that will help us.
And that addresses. No, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead. I'm gonna come back. I got it.
Okay, and I was gonna say in that, because I'm rounding out. That I think goes back to my core point of my issue, is that even in what she's saying, it's a bid to make herself feel better.
Right.
That is also survival. This theory of love is a theory that makes people feel better. And there's a failure to accept that life is difficult. It's not intended to be easy. If it was intended to be easy, it would be easy. Life is hard. And the failure to accept the difficulties of life, the failure to face the challenges, the real world challenges that come with the natural difficulties of life, is what keeps us trapped in this cycle of bullshit that she keeps talking, that she spoke on. The fact that we keep having these conversations is because you keep trying to have the easy one instead of the hard one. And you keep trying to do the easy actions instead of the difficult ones.
Yeah. And now I was just going to say too, and I think this is where we get messed up. I think because for a lot of reasons, but in terms of morality, survival is the first piece of morality. If you're not going to survive and you're not going to proliferate, then there's no point in being, that somber Christian based morality where, do unto others as you have them do unto you, which nobody else practices but us, but we'll do unto each other. But that's another conversation.
Right.
But see, I mean, we can say the white man does that to us too, right? But the the concept of this whole thing about love bringing the world around. Love doesn't produce energy, not the type that'll keep your house warm, not the type that'll keep your vehicles moving, not the type that'll, that's utilized to, manufacture these smart devices that we seem to love so much. That takes other things. That takes access to resources. That takes the ability to impose your will on other groups of people. That takes, addressing, markets and creating a situation where you're treated fair. This whole notion of we just need love, with in terms of society, I've never seen on a job application where it says, what are your feelings about love? And I've never seen on, I'm saying, a business grant or anything where, any people want to start their own business. I've never seen love being the primary concept that was poured into it. Maybe your love for the craft or whatever, but this weak, and I'm tired of us taking weak positions now, because I'm not even talking about the woman. I'm talking about the young brother. To even pull those quotes from James Baldwin, which speaks to his, non-threatening position on addressing the obvious problem in the room, the 800-pound gorilla sitting in the middle of the room. And we gotta, there's certain times and places where we just have to call things what they are. Hurt feelings be damned. Sometimes people's feelings need to be hurt so they can truly examine why it is that we chose to purposefully hurt your feelings. And this is one of those concepts. This is one of those times where, we have to let them listen, man. First of all, you can't let somebody just come into your living room and bullshit you. And sit there and convince you, that is sunny outside and you see overcast and thunder, you hear lightning and thunder in the background. Hey. We got to stop playing those games of where we just want to be the catalyst of getting along. And so we'll say anything, even if it proverbially throws our community, our people under the bus. So no matter where she came in on some feel-good policies and politics, and I've made my mistakes in the past of, letting a wolf pass the gate before having to rein it back in. But in terms of that, then that's young man, take the wisdom from 3 elders to you. Young brother, if you ever see this response to your video, that that doesn't end well for us. That has got me ostracized from certain groups because I've done this. I learned quickly that you don't do that shit. You know what I'm saying? I'm talking about from experience of this kumbaya shit. That don't work. You got to be for your own group. And then being from your own group, only then can you establish diplomatic relations with other groups of people. You don't have to hate anybody. I got people that are not black, but I'm black nationalist to the core. And they understand that. And they respect that because they know that's my nation.
That conversation was like, hey, I know my granddaddy beat you up and I benefit from my granddaddy beat you up, but let's be friends. And forget about my granddaddy beating you up and forget about me benefit from my granddaddy beating you up. But let's be friends because I'm nice. I'm not like my grandfather. I'm nice. No,
it's like my granddaddy, his sons, his grandsons, my brothers.
But I'm nice.
And I kind of sat there and I even giggled when it was happening.
But I'm nice.
But since now I kind of need you to help me out. Let's be nice.
And I got to know you better. So you're really cool once I got to know you. And I want to help. Even though I'm not gonna do any repairing of the wounds, but let's forget all of that and let's just be friends because that's what we're supposed to do because it's about love and unity.
And it also reminds me of another situation that happened about a decade ago when I was hosting a blog talk show, and everybody was so infatuated about this white girl who jumped on the line and was talking about how she would like to join our push because she was ostracized in her community. And I thought, hey, listen, if you really want to do some work, go to your community and have this conversation. That woman should be in the Asian community having these conversations. You don't need to come over here to black people and have this conversation with us. Black people have forever long have been extending the olive branch. It's time for you to go to your community and have those conversations, because maybe she's over here because she was ostracized over there. You know what I'm saying? So I'm just gonna leave that there.
Yeah. Hey man, look, I was scrolling through TikTok, either TikTok or Instagram, and then I went to TikTok to try to find it, and then it led me down the rabbit hole, and I went to YouTube and I found the full interview. And so this comes from the Know Your Rights Camp YouTube channel, and I'm gonna put a link to the full conversation in the description.
Of course it does.
But it's the Know Your Rights Camp, and the title of it is Critical Race Theory, Myths versus Reality. But the part that they made a clip.
What was the reality? Did they present reality?
I listened to the whole thing. It
was a bunch of myths.
It was ideals.
Oh, it's all idealistic. A bunch of myths. Okay.
It's all idealistic, but it's a young and up and coming podcast, and I thought, because this podcast actually only has 89 views. But
you just gave a huge bump.
I know, but the clip went viral. But I thought it would. We got to talk about it, like, because I had something else for us to talk about, but like, nah. I found this. We got to talk about this because us as Black people, we have to realize what Dr. Clark said and why he said what he said, and in the tone he said when he told us, "Damn it, we have no friends. You want a friend? Look in the mirror." He wasn't lying. Look at history. No group of people is exempt from the list of people who boo-booed on Black people. None of these groups of people are, including us.
Yeah, not even Canadians.
So we gotta realize that. Stop acting like just because this person is nice that this whole racial dynamic thing just gonna be different. It don't happen like that. It don't. It's a group thing, and group people. The groups are gonna look out for themselves because they're only about their own survival. They're not about the survival of other groups as well. So don't be fooled.
Or be fooled.
At the beginning, like this video,
or
comment,
be fooled.
subscribe, share.
What you want.
You know what I'm saying? Joe Biden and everybody told us to tell you, if you don't hit that like button, then you support all the stuff that bring down the Black community. So you better hit that like button, because if not, then you don't support anything Black. You don't even close your eyes because you don't like the Black. So make sure you hit that like button.
When I'm alone in my room, sometimes I stare at the walls.
And then I open my eyes and I realize
conscience call.
FetLifeStation.com.
Telling me I need a girl who's as sweet as a dove for the first time in my life.
Yeah. I need love. FetLifeStation.com. Y'all make sure y'all check it out. FetLifeStation.com. Check out PC. Support my brother, thepax.org. Go to the website, read through the website, listen to the information. It's packed full of resources and information for you. Of course, ontheshoulders1.com. So make sure you check it out. We still got Gooch Juice on sale at ontheshoulders1.com. We didn't sell out last week because we did our advertisement last week of the Goose Juice. We didn't sell out. So I appreciate you, Pat, for starting the conversation. So we got 10 bottles left. So if you want some, make sure you go to the website and get your Goose Juice, and
wow,
do what you gotta do. They say
it help me for my Goose Juice.
They say it help reverse aging. So make sure y'all do what y'all do.
Okay.
Hey man,
talking my Goose Juice. Think you better let it loose.
Woo, woo, woo.
A lot of pauses going on.
Hey man,
a lot of pause.
Joseph Ward, Patrick Irvin, Professor Carl Tone Jones, man. Protect your gooch. We'll holler at y'all.
Bro, what?